Welcome to the Build Better Blueprint, the podcast where we discuss the foundations of real estate, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. Join Christian Cardamone as he shares insights, strategies, and stories that will empower you to level up your business, your lifestyle, and your impact. Let's build a better blueprint for success, starting now.
Hey, this is Christian Cardamone. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Build Better Blueprint. Today I've got a real treat for you. I have a friend and a guest named Brian Tibbs. He's a husband, father, investor, student, and teacher, and he has an incredible story. Brian's proof that you don't need to be rich to start investing in real estate. You don't need rich parents. You don't need to be born under a lucky star or with a silver spoon. You just need determination, drive, and discipline.
Right.
His story definitely inspired me. And now he's on a journey to be a best-selling author, a community leader, and we look forward to chatting with you. So, Brian, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here today.
Christian, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here and excited for our conversation.
So, I'll let the audience know initially a little bit about yourself and your journey into real estate, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it really starts. I was quite young. I remember one conversation specifically that really kind of set me on the path. I was 16 years old, maybe 17, and I was at my parents had taken our family to go visit my grandparents. So I'm there, and I'm a 17-year-old kid or 16 or whatever it was, pretty self-absorbed, and I was just ready to go home, right? And kind of bored with being there. And I overheard my dad and my grandpa talking about they were going to go buy a duplex. I didn't know what a duplex was, but I kind of deduced from their conversation that it was two houses side by side. They were going to go buy this place. And I was like, why would you do that? You have houses, and then they're going to put tenants in them to hopefully pay them rent. Then they're going to pay this massive payment to the bank every month. Then they're going to show up at 11 o'clock at night to unclog a toilet. I thought that they were insane. Why in the world would you trust some stranger to pay you rent so that you can hopefully pay the bank back for this massive loan and all this interest and all this stuff? I just thought it was nuts. And then when I heard, I don't remember if it was my dad or my grandpa, they said, okay, let's call and make an offer. When I heard that they were actually serious, I decided to save these poor adults from their insanity. And I jumped into the conversation and I just basically said, why would you do something so stupid? And they kind of like paused in their tracks, not even knowing that I was paying attention. And you could see in their eyes, like the corner of their mouth kind of turning up and this twinkle in their eyes, like, oh, we got the 16-year-old kid's attention. Now we have a new goal, right? Let's engage this kid and teach him a thing or two. So we spent the next 2 hours of me like complaining about interest expenses and what if they don't pay their rent on time and what if the house burns down, and they had an answer for every single objection I had. And I was, I thought that they were just stupid. It turns out that they had thought this through. And when it came to the end, I was like, okay, well, but why are you doing this? It's like $50 a month in profit. And they said, well, it's not the cash flow. It's the pay down of the debt. It's the appreciation on the building. And we're not going to unclog toilets. We're going to hire a manager, and that's built into the cost. So they just went through all this whole thing. And then I realized, wow, in 10 years, they're going to triple their money. And so at that moment, as a 16-year-old kid, 17, whatever it was, I decided, okay, I'm going to be a real estate investor. And I kind of had in my mind that all the wealthy people I knew had real estate. And I'm just going to be real transparent and say that's all I knew about real estate when I started investing. Is, well, other people have made money, so I'm going to do it and I'm going to try to make some money. At the age of 19, I was in college and I was faced with having to go get an apartment, and I just did not want to pay, after that conversation of realizing that the tenants are paying the mortgage payment, I didn't want to be that sucker. And so I decided, okay, I want to own a house, but I can't afford it. So I bought a duplex, made the tenant on the one side pay the majority of my mortgage, and me and my roommates on the other side, we paid the rest of it. So that's how it started.
Dude, I love that. That's ironically very similar to my story, so I can totally relate to that. Hearing your parents talk about real estate and picking up on the subtleties and the nuance of the conversation, and then kind of being like intrigued, and then also it seemed like everyone we knew that, we were from humble beginnings and means as well. So everybody that had money, it seemed like real estate was like the one commonality there. I always knew that real estate made more millionaires than anything. And so I was definitely intrigued with it from a young age too. And it's crazy because, I have a young daughter, and you hear her, I'll say something like to my wife, and my daughter will pick up on it and then mention it later. And it's like, so, while she's like throwing, Paw Patrol things based on what we're talking about, you're picking up real estate nuance and getting into it. So it's you always got to pay attention about what you're talking about when there's kids in the room is the moral of the
That's
story.
right.
But it seemed to be a good lesson for you. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And so I know you're a seasoned investor at this point, and you have a tremendous portfolio. I wanted to ask you about the current asset class that you're in and that you're focusing on, because as we know in real estate, there's all different types of, there's single family, multifamily, there's commercial, then there's short-term rentals. There's a million different ways to skin the cat. And so everyone kind of picks their lane. And I wondered if you could tell the audience what your lane is and how you got into that, and then what the kind of state of the union is of your current portfolio, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So my lane currently, which is different from what it started out and may be different from what it ends up being, is short-term rentals. And I used to do long-term rentals. In 2016, I discovered this Airbnb thing. So I was looking at how much I was having to pay for a nightly rate for rent for a house. And then I asked myself, what am I getting for nightly rate? And it was like 1/3. Instead of $100 a night, I was getting $30 a night for my apartments, and I always thought in terms of what's my monthly rent. And then I thought in terms of what's my nightly rent. So I flipped all my properties in 2016 to short-term rentals, and that's what I'm still doing now. And when people ask me, why short-term rentals? Well, it made the most sense for me back in 2016, and it still makes the most sense for me now because my entire business is built around that. My staff, we have protocols, and we have standard operating procedures, and we have methods, and we have processes that are all built out for short-term rentals. And so somebody else will say, well, co-living is a better business model. And I'm not going to say it's not. I'm just going to say our business is completely built out. It's running, it's functioning, it's profitable for short-term rentals. But I always keep my eye open for something else that's going to come along that would justify a major pivot. It'd be a major disruption in my organization to shift to another asset class. But for right now, we feel like the short-term rentals is what's performing best for our situation.
Okay. That's awesome. And what states are you operating in, and how many short-term rentals do you have, and how big is your team, so someone can have an idea of what kind of operator you are?
So we have 40 short-term rental units in Idaho, mostly in the Boise city. We also have a few in some suburbs there. And then in the Phoenix metro, in the 5 different cities here in the Phoenix metro is where all of our units are. It's not quite half and half. We have a few more in Phoenix now than we have in Boise, but that's where our properties are.
Awesome. Okay, so since this is, a blueprint kind of model show, if someone was listening to this and they said, wow, man, Brian is just like killing it. He's got 40 properties. He's in short-term rentals. I love that. Hospitality. I like short-term rentals because it's an element of investment and a business with regard to the hospitality element. So it's a little bit of the best of both worlds. So you get to have an investment that's interactive essentially versus just placing it into service with management, but you actually get to participate. So it's always been attractive to me in that respect. And I know Airbnb was very attractive kind of around the COVID time because people didn't have a lot of options. So I imagine your business probably flourished during that period of time. Did you grow, expand, contract?
Yeah, it was nuts. In the very beginning, it was awful. In March of 2020, when the president said we're shutting down the country, our calendar went from, March, I only had properties in Idaho at the time, and March is leading into our peak season, May, June, July, August. And so the calendar starts to fill up and you start to get excited because it's good nightly rates. And my calendar went from 90% full to 20% full in a week.
Man.
And that was terrifying. And I actually had called all of my mortgage companies and I was like, and I learned the term forbearance, right? I never heard that before. And I was in the process. In fact, I was in the process of applying for forbearance because there was no way I was going to be able to pay all my mortgages with a calendar 20% full. And so I was in the process of getting forbearance on my properties when I decided to stop the trains. And then when I did a refi later on, they were like, you're in forbearance because the bank never stopped the process. So I got it cleaned up. But anyway, so then by maybe July or August of 2020, things dramatically turned around. You couldn't go to Europe. You couldn't go to Hawaii. People didn't want to go to hotels. And so short-term rentals just exploded. And that stayed that way till about September of 2021 when things started to go back to normal. So we had a year and a half of essentially a nonstop peak season. And so, that was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of people that jumped into the market for short-term rentals during that time because they kept hearing about the average daily rate and occupancy 100% and all this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people kind of got toasted because they bought properties at the peak of the market high interest rates and got locked into a property that no longer performs like it did. But because we had been doing it since 26, just assumed that this was a phase that was going to pass. And we didn't acquire any properties assuming that those rates were going to continue like they were. So we actually came out pretty good on the back end.
Dude, I love that, because I will attest to that as someone who, as a real estate broker, through that period, I sold a lot of properties to investors that wanted to get into that space. And I love that it's like you were there first, because there's a lot of people that got into Airbnb then and have rode the wave up. And the wave has since, I don't know if the wave has crashed, but it's headed towards the beach. And so there's been a big drop off in occupancy, it's my understanding. And now you have to really be an A player to stand out, because there's so many folks that have entered that space. And so you were really there, a pioneer. You were there before, got the benefit of riding the wave up, already having all your systems and processes and team in place. So you're able to handle that volume, translate that into returns. And now as the tide's going out, you can see who's swimming naked.
Yep.
A lot of these people will be flushed out. And so this is probably market share, I would think, coming for people who are experienced like yourself and can see opportunity. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think so. 2023 was a rough year for us even. I mean, it was a year of contraction. So what I like to tell people is our occupancy rates now are what they were, almost identical to 2019. So things have gone back to normal in that sense. It's no longer put anything out there in the market and it'll stay 95% full. That's no longer the case. You have to have a good product. It has to have the amenities people want, but we're able to get back to the same occupancy we had in 2019. But the positive thing is, inflation sucks and nobody wants inflation. I don't want inflation. But as a business that offers a product, our rates are about 25% higher than they were in 2019. So our nightly rate is higher. Our occupancy is the same. So I feel like that we're a net positive in that situation. That said, 2023 was a rough year because we were coming off that sugar high. And even us, we had stuff built into our operations that were taking advantage of the higher cash flow that we had to kind of tame and recalculate a few things and that contraction. But this year, we're back up 5% on same unit sales from this year compared to last year. So we've actually seen some growth this year, and I feel confident going forward. You never know, but if we don't slide into a recession like people have been predicting since, 2015, 2016, if we don't slide into that recession, I feel pretty confident that next year is going to be even better than 2024, which was better than 2023. And you're right. It's a tide situation, right? The tide was just way in 2021, even 2022. And now the tide is back out. I don't know if there's going to be another tide like COVID. I kind of hope not. That was way too stressful and chaotic. I'd rather see 2, 3, 4, 5% steady growth forever. That would be much more predictable and easy to operate in. And I also would caution people, use the short-term rental thing during COVID as a cautionary tale of what's the hottest new asset class, and I'm going to pile in even though I don't know anything about it. Do a little bit more research and ask yourself, is there some market dynamic that's short-lived that's causing this thing to be all the rage? Because it seems like, if you listen to the podcast every 3 or 4 months, there's this new asset class that if you're not in it, you're not smart, kind of a thing. And
Totally.
That drives me nuts.
It does, man. And that's why part of this, my mission here is to introduce an audience to people who have been in some level of expertise for a while. So you can offer something versus just being, the next guru who's got a lot of downloads because they've got a flashy car.
Right.
And so, the proof is in the pudding. And so that's where, I'd like to ask you if there was, if someone wanted to follow in your footsteps, what are the top 3 or 5 things that you would say, if you want to get into the short-term rental business, what are a handful of things that you would say for starting and point them in the right direction so that they can be successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I could answer this in several different ways, but I wrote a book called The Hacker Method, and it's actually a 5-step process. Hacker, each letter in Hacker stands for another step. So H is hack your lifestyle, A is allocation budgeting, and so on. And so I would say from a wealth building standpoint, the Hacker Method would be what I would point you to, and that is essentially what I did. When I decided to write the book, I had to sit down and figure out, what did I do? How did I do this, right? Because it was all up in my head. I'd never communicated to anybody. And when I wrote it down, this pattern emerged, and I was able to identify that essentially I was hacking what normal average people do. I did the same thing, but I hacked every element of it to work in my advantage rather than being up to my eyeballs in debt, car debt, school debt, house debt, I went on vacation, credit card debt. Rather than playing that game, I hacked all of those elements to where I was essentially paying for none of it. And instead of paying for any of that stuff, I piled it into investing. So now your specific question, that's like on wealth building in general. But your specific question was on short-term rentals. You have to own real estate. You know, I know that there's this whole asset, or they call it an asset class. It's not an asset class. It's a business of arbitrage, short-term rental arbitrage. I would never do that. I wouldn't advise anybody to do that because wealth is built in owning real estate, not renting real estate. I'm not saying you can't make money, but you're just creating a job for yourself and there's no upside on the back end. So step number one, own real estate. And somebody might say, well, but you got to have a mountain cabin or a beach house. It's $3 million or a mansion in Scottsdale. You know what? When I started short-term rentals, I had basic fourplexes with linoleum flooring and carpet, and I flipped those into short-term rentals. Now I've traded up since then, but there's no way I could be where I'm at now if I didn't just start, own real estate and get started. So I think the biggest thing that I see in the people that I coach to do what I've done is they understand the concept, but they fail to pull the trigger to take that step to actually own real estate, because making a big down payment is scary. Being responsible to unclog toilets is scary. Things that I know that I don't know is scary. And I would just say step number one, own real estate. Step number two is, there's so many more. I have a checklist of like 80 steps in order to get a short-term rental. But, you need to get your property built out that's going to be attractive in a way that customers will want to stay there, with amenities, with furnishings, with photographs, artwork, and then actually get it photographed professionally, and then get it listed on as many of the online travel agencies, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, Google Vacation Rentals, and having your own website. And then I guess the final step for a very basic way to get started, get pricing algorithm software. You need to have that in order to compete in the market today. There's gurus out there with fancy cars that tell you how to do their pricing manually. And the only reason why he's saying that is so that you will pay him hundreds of dollars for him to tell you how to price your properties. It's garbage. Get pricing algorithms that are way smarter and way faster than you and I. And that's the only way to compete in today's market.
I love that. And so what I kind of took from that is number one, own real estate. Don't go the arbitrage model. Make the commitment to owning, because you'll have the asset, you'll have the equity, which is the back end that you don't get because you're already going to have a business one way or the other, whether it's arbitrage or you're an operator, but you may as well build the equity along the way and have that. Number two is just basically get into action. So regardless, just if you're on the sidelines, you're reading, you're studying, just start participating on any level, even if it's just communicating with other operators, learning, but eventually you gotta dip your toe in the pool. Marketing, sounds like marketing is very important, being in the right channels. You mentioned the top ones, direct booking, all of the online channels, and then using the best tools that are out there, paying attention and leveraging. I'm sure AI probably plays a role in dynamic pricing and stuff like that. That's great, man. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I wanted our audience to hear, is kind of a step-by-step guide if they want to get in.
One more note I'd like to make on the asset class. So I don't know if you've ever heard the concept that McDonald's is not in the hamburger business, they're in the real estate business. And I would like to say, I'm not really in the short-term rental business. I'm in the real estate business. I use short-term rentals to maximize the usage of my properties, right? That doesn't mean you can't be passionate about short-term rentals. There's some people that love to decorate their houses and they love to host people, and my team handles all that, so I don't deal with any of that kind of stuff. But I'm in the business because that's the best cash flow I can find that's going to come out of the assets that I own to pay down that debt, to let depreciation do its thing. And the end game is to have a massive portfolio of real estate. I use short-term rentals to make that happen, right? And so if you can think about it in terms like that, that might be helpful.
Very helpful. I love that. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit, because I know that you have this book that just came out, and you also have this community that is thriving, and you want to grow that, and we want to help support you in that. So tell us your philosophy on the importance of hiring a coach, joining a community, and participating in this versus just trying to do it all on your own.
Yeah, if I added it all up, I'd probably be shocked. I'm spending somewhere in the neighborhood, maybe $35,000 a year for coaching, and that's going up. I'm hiring more coaches. I'm hiring nutritionists. I'm hiring personal trainers. I've gotten bitten by the coaching bug. Why? Because I haven't seen more growth in myself personally since I started coaching at any point in my life before. I mean, think about all the top performing athletes. They all have coaches. Like I said that to my family, and my son said, Michael Jordan didn't have a coach. I said, are you kidding me? Phil Jackson, you never heard of Phil Jackson? He was his coach. Yes, the greatest have coaches because they realize that somebody outside of themselves can see things that we cannot see. Like literally, your eyes are in your own head. You can't see the back of your head. You can't see your back. You can't see. There's so many physical things that you can't see, but you can also miss things from a perspective that somebody else that can see from the outside in, an unemotional,
Totally.
third party to see what you're doing. But also, I'm very driven, but I will never push myself as much as when somebody else is watching and holding me accountable to what I'm doing.
Totally.
So coaching, I think, maybe I make a really bold statement here. I'm making sure this is accurate. It's probably the key driver of my success now that I've really embraced the concept of coaching. But yeah, so I think that that's essential. I think I'm answering your question. I think that that's
Totally.
essential for making progress.
So, okay. And ironically, since you mentioned Michael Jordan, we're about 1.5 miles from his high school and where he grew up here in Wilmington, North Carolina, the same high school I went to. So shout out to Michael Jordan. Okay. So tell us about your community and what you offer and the ideal student that should be considered joining your community and where they can go to learn about it.
Yeah, Christian, I'm sorry. You said something about Michael Jordan and the signal drop for a second. What was that?
You had mentioned him and getting a coach. And I said, ironically, we're about 1 mile away from the high school that he went to here, Laney High School here in Wilmington, and where he grew up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our gym's named after him.
Yeah, right. All top performers have a coach. That's the point.
So I'm not sure if you caught my last question then. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your community and who's the ideal candidate for someone to join your community and where can they learn about your community?
Yeah, so it's called The Unexpected Investor, which is part of the subtitle of my book. The book is The Hacker Method, The Unexpected Investor's Guide to Building Wealth, Even on Limited Income. And the book was written for my community members. I had them in mind when I wrote the book, trying to make, the Hacker Method, it's 5 steps, trying to make it understandable. You can kind of think through, okay, which step am I on, kind of a thing. And it's written for people who have a desire to do something different than what maybe culture has taught us, or to do something different than their parents had done. Like I have a member who said, my parents are living off of Social Security. They're struggling. They're still paycheck to paycheck, even though they're retired. They're living in the same house because they can't afford to move. They're making decisions on medications that they shouldn't be having to make because of the cost of their situation. And when they get too old to take care of themselves, I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't have any money either. So it's really targeted at those people who want something better, want something more significant, more stable, more financially secure for their long-term future than what they have been taught by their culture, maybe by their parents, or just by everybody that's around them. And they have the guts to take a step out, get some coaching. That's what the community is for. It's a community of people. We're all working together. So members, iron sharpens iron within the membership. I provide personal coaching to the group. And on occasion, I provide one-on-one coaching as well. And it's all built around what are the things that I need to do in order to form diamonds out of my financial situation. And I always like to tell people that how are diamonds formed? We know that it takes time and pressure. So if you have a lump of coal sitting out on the surface of the ground and it sits there for 1,000,000 years, it's not going to turn into a diamond. If you have that same lump of coal that's underground and it's under intense pressure, but only for like an hour, it's just going to crush the coal. It's not going to turn into a diamond. But if you have that coal under intense pressure over long periods of time, what comes out at the end is a beautiful diamond. The same thing is the truth with our wealth. We need time and pressure. Anybody who's telling you you can be a multi-gazillionaire in 45 minutes or 45 days or 2 years is selling you something that isn't true. Okay, you win the lottery. Yeah, you might as well say, I'm going to get struck by lightning. It's the same odds. Okay. Yeah. If you want to build wealth, you need long periods of time and pressure. And that pressure is what we talk about in the Unexpected Investor community. That is putting your money to work at effective or elevated rates of return on your investment. And we talk about that all the time. We try to make it as simple as we possibly can. We have accountability groups within the group. We have coaching. We have different resources and tools that we pass out all the time. And we're starting to become friends with each other too, which is a very cool part of the whole process.
I love that, man. That's great. Like building a community is kind of I think the trajectory of an investor. When you get to a certain point and you have holdings and you've kind of arrived essentially financially, then yeah, I think you have a responsibility to give back and to help bring other people up to that level, because success is helping elevate everyone around you. Otherwise, doing it all by yourself is just selfish, in my opinion. You obviously have a skill set and the discipline, and so to share that with the community, I think is awesome, man. I highly commend you for doing that. I think it's just tremendous, and I love, more importantly, that you are still a student of coaching yourself, because you're not someone standing on their high horse saying, "I made it here, come join my community, and I'll tell you how I did it." You're still pushing yourself further, trying to reach new levels, and so that's the kind of community that you want to be a part of. And no matter what asset class or business or industry you're in, you should always be pushing yourself to follow people who are still on that journey, because I don't think anyone has made it. We're all seeking more, and so that's really important.
An important part of my story is that I spent 16 years as the CEO of a nonprofit. And for those 16 years, I was just so focused on building the nonprofit that I would push revenue that was coming in towards the mission, and at the expense really of my own income. And when I was finished with that phase of my life, I went back and I did the math. If you took the total amount of salary that I received from the nonprofit divided by the hours that I worked in the nonprofit, I made $9.20 an hour on average. It was lower in the beginning, it was higher in the end, but that was the average amount of money I made. And I still was able to build a multi-million-dollar net worth that my portfolio, I don't have to work another day in my life. And so when people come to the community, I really kind of highlight that and say, I don't care how much money you make. You can become a multi-millionaire if you do these steps, and the community is here to help you make that happen.
I love that, man. That's the proof is right there. I mean, less than minimum wage, basically. From the third world, you managed to build an empire, and that's a whole nother discussion for another day, because your story is incredible, having spent so much time and doing so much as a missionary, that we have to have you back and talk about that, because
I'd love to.
That's another really inspiring story. So that's why I was really drawn to talk to you and to introduce you to the audience, man, because I think you're a very dynamic person, and I've enjoyed getting to know you, and can't wait to party with you in San Diego. So a couple more things.
It's gonna be awesome.
What are some of the goals for you for next year, and how do you plan to achieve them? Are you focused on building the portfolio, pushing the book, growing the community? Knowing you're ambitious, probably a little bit of everything. Tell us about what to expect, so next time we do chat, we can hold you accountable to what you're saying you're going to do.
There's some accountability. I love it. I love accountability. Accountability is maybe one of the best parts of the whole coaching aspect of, hey, you said you were going to do this. Why didn't you do it? And I think most people probably don't like accountability. It's like not comfortable for somebody to critique us and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, you didn't do it. Or, hey, I can see you're procrastinating. I've learned to embrace it. It still maybe stings a bit at the very beginning, but once you get past that kind of emotional response, you appreciate it. Like, you're right. I wasted an hour on TikTok. I don't want to do that anymore. And so, the accountability is good. So what am I going to do this year? You're going to hold me accountable. Here we are. I want 15 more units. So I have 40 short-term rentals, and I have 5 units that I'm partnered with that are a sober living house. Okay. So I want to go from 45 total units to add 15 more units. So that put me to 60 units by December 31st of 2025. Market.
Got it.
The community, we're at 23 members in the community, and I'm committed to growing that to 100. So that's massive growth. We're going to do a big push starting in quarter 1. So that's by December 31st of 2025. And on my fitness goals, I'm committed to getting to 0.5% body fat. And I'm going to climb into the top third in the CrossFit Open. Those are my goals for 2025. So you can hold me accountable.
I love that, man. I love that you have, it's a well-rounded approach too, because you incorporate your finances and also your fitness. That's a huge part, because if you're not taking care of your fitness, then you're not going to be here to enjoy the fruits of your labor with your finances.
Absolutely. And my community is about investing, and it's about being a financial steward of what we have, but we talk about other aspects too. Like, one of the pillars of our community is relationships are more important than money. And so we can't just at all costs run over everybody and try to accumulate wealth. And another tenet of our community, or the third pillar, is generosity. So once we have received this blessing that we've worked hard to accomplish, we need to bless others that are less fortunate than us. So yeah, it can't just all be about money. And in fact, I tell people, if that's all you're interested in, this community is not for you. So it needs to be more a holistic of your entire life.
That's great, man. I love that. Okay, a couple more questions for you. Let's see. So what are right now maybe 3 of your favorite books or podcasts that you've been consuming that have helped you kind of see the light, see maybe a path forward on a couple things that you want to share with our audience?
My new favorite podcast last year, going into this year as well, is the All In podcast. So it's 4 venture capitalists from Silicon Valley, none of which I'd ever heard of before, but they're big wigs, they're all billionaires or whatever. They've all part of Facebook and, Google and PayPal and all these different companies. They're all buddies with Elon Musk and all that. And I like to listen to it because I like the fact that they're talking, they use acronyms that I have no idea what they're talking about. So they're talking about a higher level of investing than I have mastered. And I like that challenge. I like to think about someday I'd like to be a venture capitalist or an angel investor or whatever. And I don't even know what those terms are really.
Yeah.
But it's pushing me to a higher level of investing. So I really like that podcast. For somebody that's just getting started in short-term rentals, I will occasionally listen to Thanks for Visiting. It's a kind of a niche. It's targeted at women, but I've gotten some nuggets out of it that I've applied to my business on the short-term rental side. And they really are focused at kind of those solopreneurs, the one man or one man and wife or one woman shop that has 1, 2, or 3 short-term rentals. They're really providing practical advice for that segment. So I think that would be good. Books, anything that is in the area of your asset class, there's so much material out there now. One of the things that I do always recommend to everybody, including people in my community, is Atomic Habits, because a lot of our success is going to be driven by what we do day in and day out. And Atomic Habits has made a big impact on how I lead my daily walk. And I think it really helps people change behaviors without it being so painful, right? It's atomic, meaning tiny little microscopic changes in different areas to help you reach your goals, which is smart.
Awesome. That's great, man. Those are read Atomic Habits. That's one I try and read every couple of years. And the other 2 podcasts I'll definitely check out. It's crazy. Like with podcasting now these days, there's so much information available, and it doesn't need to be the Joe Rogans of the world, the top rated podcasts. There's so many small to mid-sized podcasts of just people that have so much information to share. It's really, you have to seek it out. And I think that's important. You have to take time to do that, but there's a lot of gold out there. Okay.
So here's a tip for you guys. This is something I would tell my community. If you're wanting to grow, instead of putting on a podcast when you have a long drive, like if you have a commute to work or whatever, putting on a podcast that's just brain candy, people laughing and telling jokes and stuff like that, put on something where you're going to learn something. Right? And that's one of those atomic habits where I'm just going to make a slight change. I'm using my drive time and go find something maybe that you don't understand all the terms, or it's something you want to master, and plug that in. That's a tip.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'll say that I've adopted that myself. I'm a musician. And so music is obviously a huge part of my life. And the irony is I haven't listened to music in my car in years, because now it's always the latest episodes on these new podcasts that I'm circulating through. So, my wife gets in my car and I've got them on like 4 speed, so it's like, and she's like, how do you process that? But for me, that's like entertainment. I'm learning. It's just it's great, man. And so I think that's wise advice. Okay, let's see. Last question I have for you.
What instrument do you play? I'm just curious.
Bass guitar.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
you're that guy.
Thunderstick, low end. I play everything, but I'm really only pretty good at the bass guitar. So it worked out. It's been a long time. So
can't wait to hear you play.
Definitely a passion of mine. Final thoughts. What should I be asking you in order to really distill down with regard to your community, your book, and your expertise in short-term rentals specifically? What should I be asking you, or what would you like to say as kind of like a parting thought for our audience today?
Yeah, I think, Brandon Turner has become a friend of mine. And I always remember when he was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, which, by the way, another podcast to click into that's less entertainment and is more data and market driven, is a Bigger Pockets podcast. It's like one of the sub podcasts called On the Market. It's not short-term rental focused, but it's very, very real estate market focused. And they talk about statistics and trends and facts more so than this is how you get rich in 10 days, right? So On the Market is another great podcast to listen to, and I listen to a lot of their episodes.
Definitely.
So one of the questions that Brandon always asks at the end of his thing is, what separates the people who have been successful in real estate from those that never got started? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that has resonated with me because as I have begun coach people, that's what I have noticed is it seems so difficult. It's easy to understand the concept of how to build wealth with real estate. You can see all the charts going crazy. You can see the cash flow building over time. You can see that debt going down and wealth being built. But there's something difficult about stepping out of your comfort zone and taking action. And so my parting thing for you is if you want to change your trajectory, if you want your future to be different than your today, you have to figure out what it's going to take for you to take that first step. That's all you got to take is the first step, because then subsequent steps, that will be the first step into that direction. Just take that first step. And for the person that is scared of making a mistake, and I think this is all of us. Two things I want to tell you. Number one, I always feel nervous before every deal. And I've bought and sold hundreds of investments. I'm always nervous. And I always ask myself, what if I'm wrong? I push through those because I've done my research and I am confident enough that the risk is going to pay off in the end. And if it doesn't, it's not going to ruin me. I'm not using money that I need to eat with. I've set aside investing money. And if I lose it, that's okay. I think that people that are unwilling to take extra money that they have, they're unwilling to take it out of their grip and let it go to go work and multiply itself. I think that's a form of greed. That's an unhealthy relationship with our money. Open your fist and let it fly out. The second thing I want to say is if you're not confident in your due diligence, which is just a fancy word for research, find a mentor that has done what you want to do. Show them your project. Have them check out the numbers. Ask them to be critical. And if they endorse the project, shut your eyes, shut your trap, and sign the paper. Move forward.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's great advice. Money is definitely a tool. So it has to be, once you have your basic needs met, to hold on to it, it's like, if you're going to chop down a tree and you've got a chainsaw in your shed, but you're out there trying to cut it down with a butter knife, that chainsaw is the money. Put it to work for you. Let it help you chop down the tree and continue to do more good work. And secondly, find a mentor, no matter who it is. Join a community. Get around people that are doing the things that you want to do and talk to them. People love to help other people. And if you're bringing a problem to somebody and they can help solve it, it's just beautiful. And I love doing that for other people. I know you do. And it'll take some of the fear out. Have some confidence in yourself. Do your homework. Do your due diligence. But at the end of the day, I think when the rubber meets the road, take the first step. Take action is probably one big takeaway that I've gotten from this today is just get into motion.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep. It takes time. One of my favorite little quips or little phrases is the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. Well, if you didn't plant it 10 years ago, plant it today so that 10 years from now you've got fruit. Same thing with real estate. Yeah, of course it was better in 2010. Yeah, of course in 2019. Yeah, of course in 2022. Plant that seed today, and 10 years from now, you're going to be so thankful that you did that.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's great. Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough, man. If you will tell our audience how we can support you and where we can go to find you, to connect you, and follow your journey, because we know you've got 12 months to get 15 more units, to get that body fat down, and to get that community growing, man. So tell us where we can go to learn more about you and follow your journey.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media at Unexpected Investor. My website is unexpectedinvestor.com. And if you put a /community, you can find out all the details on the community there. Or if you just want to chat, like I offer everybody, I'll just sit down and chat with you for a half an hour and listen to your question and try to give you some advice or some direction. No charge at all. Just go to my website, click the connect button. I would love to talk to you. And what you were saying is we like to give back. I have so much fun coaching people. I would do it for free, honestly. I love it. I love giving back to people who are eager and curious and wanting to take positive steps in their life. I just love that. So love to talk with you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. That's Brian Tibbs, author of The Hacker Method and leader of the community, The Unexpected Investor. We're so grateful for your time today, and tune in next time. And thanks for joining us here on the Build Better Blueprint.